Hey students, thanks for joining us for another week of online life groups. My name is Laura Hall. I'm the Happy Valley student pastor, and we are so glad that you're here with us tonight. We're going to be continuing on in our series talking about peace and how we can live in peace with each other. And one thing in my house that does not bring us much peace is sports. My husband and I are both huge college football fans, but there's one problem. We went to different schools, which means we cheer for completely different football teams. Now, he's gonna kill me for telling you guys this, but our first fight was actually about whose conference was better in football. Now, I'm not just talking about like heated discussion. I'm talking door slamming, yelling. Our first big fight was about football. Now, I think it's really easy to see how competition can bring out the worst in us in sports, but I would say that there's probably so many different things that we compete against each other with. Maybe for you, it's school. Maybe there's someone in your friend group who school and learning just comes really easy to them. So whenever you get a test grade back or you hear your friends talking about it, you become insecure about your grades. Or maybe it's social media. So-and-so gets way more TikTok likes than I do. Or have you seen their Instagram? It is so popular. It can be so easy to think about other people through the lens of comparison. But the passage we're going to be talking about tonight, Paul talks about how we can live at peace with one another without competition. So we're going to be in Romans chapter 12, and we're going to start in verse 6. In his grace, God has given us different gifts for doing certain things well. So if God has given you the ability to prophesy, speak out with as much faith as God has given you. If your gift is serving others, serve them well. If you are a teacher, teach well. If your gift is to encourage others, be encouraging. If it is giving, give generously. If God has given you leadership ability, take the responsibility seriously. And if you have a gift for showing kindness to others, do it gladly. You see, Paul says that God gave us different gifts in his grace. And the more that I think about this, it really starts to make sense to me. Imagine if we all had the same gifts. The way that we would see each other would purely be through competition. Imagine if all of us were really good at singing. That was the thing that we were best at. All we would be thinking about is, well, who's the best singer, right? Like, I know I'm good, but who's the best? Or maybe, what if we were all really good at playing soccer? We would constantly be comparing stats. Who scored the most goals? Who can run the fastest? There would only be one type of Christ follower and only one type of church. Now, I want you to think about your life group. I bet that there are a few people who play the same sports or are involved in the same things. But what I think probably makes your life group so cool is that there's so many people in your life group who do completely different things. And what's so cool about that is that you are able to support each other in different ways. You can say, hey, I'm not the best soccer player, but I know that my friend is, and so I'm going to go to her soccer game and I am going to cheer so hard for her because we are not in competition with each other. This is what Paul is talking about. If we can recognize that our gifts are unique to us, that God has gifted us all in different ways, it allows us to appreciate how he has gifted other people and not live in competition with them. Here's the other thing about gifts. We have a choice of how we're going to use them. Let's go back to verse 7. It says, if your gift is serving others, serve them well. I want to put emphasis on that word, well. If you are a teacher, teach well. You see, God gave us these gifts, but that doesn't mean that we just get to kick back and say, oh, cool, I'm good at this. I don't have to work at it because this is just how God made me. No, he calls us to do these things well. We have so many students who you have seen use their gifts in incredible ways, and they are so talented. We have students who lead worship, who lead discussion groups. We even have students who speak and deliver the message. But what you don't see behind the scenes is all of the practice and time that goes into preparing to do those things well. Our worship team practices every single week so that they can do worship in the best way that they can. Our students who speak spend hours beforehand preparing their messages and practicing so that they can do it to their best of their ability. When you are working at something for God's glory, make sure that it is your best. So what's the point? Why did God give us all of these gifts? Why did he create us to be different? Why did he create us to all have these different gifts? Well, let's keep reading and see what his ultimate purpose for our lives is. We're going to pick up in verse 9. Don't just pretend to love others. Really love them. Hate what is wrong. Hold tightly to what is good. Love each other with genuine affection and take delight in honoring each other. Never be lazy, but work hard and serve the Lord enthusiastically. Guys, here's what it all comes down to: love. We could use our gifts in so many different ways. Any gifts that we have, we could use them to serve ourselves. We could use them to make ourselves look good, to point all of the attention to us of, hey, look at me, look how great I am. But that's not what God is calling us to do. He's calling us to use our gifts to love others and to point them to Jesus. When we can view our lives through the lens that nothing that we have is for us, that everything that we have is for Jesus, a few things start to happen. The first is that competition becomes less important. Like we said earlier, when we can recognize that our gifts are just how God uniquely wired us, and our friends' gifts is how God uniquely wired them to go love others, we can care less about comparing ourselves to others. We can start to work together towards the same goal, loving each other and pointing others to Jesus, and that is what it truly looks like to live in peace with others. When we are working towards the same goal, comparison melts away. The next thing that I think happens is that having a lot of stuff or certain cool things starts to matter less. Okay, I'm gonna be really honest with you. When I walk into the doors of Target, this little voice inside my head starts going that I need everything. Target is not a good place for me. Guys, my closet at home is full of perfectly good clothes and shoes, but for some reason, the second I walk through those bright red doors, I need this new pair of sandals and this pair of jeans, and I need them now. That is me viewing my money and the things that I have through the lens of how they benefit me. But when I start to look at how I can use my resources to bless other people, to be a part of making other people feel valued and pointing them to Jesus, all of that doesn't matter anymore. If you remember, one of the things that Paul talks about when he's talking about spiritual gifts is giving. That is truly a gift that we have, that we can use our resources, use our money, use the things that we have, and we can give it away. That is what's one thing that can point people to Jesus. And when we start to look at the things that we have through this lens, the game of comparing of, oh, I have this and you don't, starts to become a lot less fun. And I would argue that in the long run, it really wasn't that much fun to begin with. And the last thing that I think happens is that we get to see God use our gifts in creative ways. So a couple of years ago, I started a blog. And honestly, it was just something that I was like, this isn't really gonna go anywhere, just something that was kind of fun. I was doing it with a couple of friends. But over time, I started putting more and more time into it, and I gained some followers. I had companies, reaching out and sending things to me, and it was all about me. I loved the attention that I got from this. I loved the things that people would say to me, the compliments they would give me, and it was all about me, me, me. What can I get out of this? How can I use this to point people to me? And over the summer, I kind of started realizing that this wasn't setting well with me. This whole thing that I was doing, this whole community that I was building based on myself, it was empty. It was around this time that God started working in my heart and pointing me towards ministry. And you see, now that I've started, and now that I am answering his call, that I'm stepping into this role of being your student pastor, none of that matters anymore. But here's where our creative God steps in and blows me away. I'll be really honest with you. I didn't list I know how to run an Instagram on my resume when I was applying for this job. I didn't really think that mattered. But now look at where we are. I didn't know that being able to talk to a camera would be a way that I could glorify God. But look at where we are. God can take anything, even if it starts out as being something so selfish, as being something that is pointing just to me. God can work through any of it. And guys, this time in our lives is such a cool reminder of this. We can use our gifts in completely new ways that we never imagined possible. One of my favorite stories in the Bible is the story of Esther. And if you haven't read it before, I would encourage you to read it. And it's a pretty long, amazing story, but to make it really short and maybe make it sound a little bit intriguing to you, here's how I would sum it up. Esther becomes queen, which that in itself is a really unlikely feat. But being queen, she uses her influence and risks her life to save her people from an evil plot. If that doesn't sound like a movie trailer, I don't know what does. You guys should definitely read it. But there's a verse that has always stuck out to me, especially during this season. And it's the second half of Esther 4:14. It says, "Who knows if perhaps you were made queen for just such a time as this?" Now, I don't think any of us are going to go and become king or queen anytime soon. But what I do know is this: God has given us all a purpose. And who knows? Maybe it was for just such a time as this. So here's my challenge for you. I want you to spend some time in prayer this week and ask God to inspire you to use your gifts in completely new ways. Now, for some of you, as we've been talking tonight, maybe there's been something that has come up in your head that you know that you have been uniquely gifted in this area, and maybe you just need to ask God how you can use that for His glory. But for some of you, it might mean having some conversations with people you trust, people like your parents, your life group leaders, your close friends, asking them, what are things that you see in me that God could use for His glory in His kingdom? Guys, our God is such a creative God, and He wants to use you to make the gospel good news for others. Thank you guys so much for being with us tonight. Go ahead and head back to your life group discussions, and we'll see you next week.